Welcome to Australian Hunger. I am your host Ben. Today on the show I've got an interview with Grvik, an interesting project which sort of combines a lot of different elements from post-rock and noise and doom. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's sort of better left to the guys themselves to sort of explain it throughout the interview. Sorry about the delay in getting this episode out, but before I get to the interview, if you're like me, you've been following the story of the band Threatin, who sort of had a European tour, which in a lot of ways wasn't. So I think I could talk about this story for about an entire episode, for about an hour itself, but to sort of keep it simple, basically what happened is the guy behind this band Threatin basically invented the fan base, the touring company, the label behind the band, and through that managed to actually book himself an entire European tour, which no one actually attended, which is a really interesting approach to booking a tour. Generally the idea is to play to people, but you know, it's not for everyone. Some people don't like to play to anyone at all. And basically how he did this was he created this fake touring agency which booked the venues. I guess we don't really think about this because we kind of see the aftermath of the investment of time and money that touring agencies and bands put into these kind of events. But essentially you can have various different ways to approach this. Maybe a venue might put on an event itself, but in this instance what the guy did was he approached these venues and he booked them out prepaid. Obviously the venues have two separate interests in that they want to get paid for having the event, but they also want people to attend because that brings in a bunch of revenue through the drinks that they purchase at the event. But the way he did it was, because he booked it himself, all the tickets were going through this fake booking company. So when the venue asked him, hey, how many tickets have been sold? He just lied. He just lied. And they had no idea what was coming, no idea that when the band was actually playing, no one would turn up. And when I say no one would turn up, that's not an exaggeration. Basically, the reports are that, you know, no one was there and the venues are basically shocked. And obviously, this is a little bit horrifying because the venues are going into this in good faith and expecting an honest reporting of what's going on. And that's not what's happened. So they're getting to these nights and they're being fleeced basically out of the expected money that they're going to get from, you know, a well-attended event, an event which is attended to the extent which this promotion agency, Stage Right Bookings, actually had. Just an example of how sparsely attended these events were. One of the venues that they were playing was the Underworld, and they actually posted publicly to Threatin's Facebook page saying, what happened to the 291 advance ticket sales your agent said you'd sold? 3 people turned up. Now, as you can imagine, word catches on pretty quick, and the tour has basically collapsed. They've been deleting social media, Threatin has. Venues have started cancelling. Some venues are going to continue on with it in the hopes that this advanced publicity of the kind of failure, that the rolling failure and rolling fraud that this tour was, might bring some curiosity folks in. But it seems like some of the band has actually left, naturally, when you find out this is such a lie. And you know, it sort of all just evaporated. really disappointing in a lot of ways, because a lot of young bands would have been on the bills for each of these events, and now they find out we actually don't have an event to attend. We're really excited to play this show, and it's not going to happen. There's obviously been some niceness come out of it. One of the more recent events, I think it was still going ahead. I think it was free at the door, and it was still giving the opportunity to those local bands. They're really cool, but obviously I think most of the events of the tour will be cancelled. Both disappointing. I mean, hopefully that gives a way for venues to put on alternative events and recoup some of the possible lost income. I'm not one to necessarily vouch for capital concerns, but obviously it's really important for us as a community, the European community in this instance, to have places to play, and, for them to actually have bands turn up, perform well, and get people to attend so they can continue on and on and on. To this guy behind it, Jared Threatin, I assume it's not his real name, essentially he seems to have bought all this. So he had the money apparently to prepay all these venues. He had the money to, and the time, I guess, to set up the fake label, the fake tour operations agency. It really just shows like how far you can get if you have money in this world. He didn't have a fan base, some sort of popular desire for him to tour, to play shows in Europe, but he could still do it anyway, despite the fact that I think a lot of bands would like to, a lot of people in Europe would like bands that they love to play there, and it's probably not going to happen, or at least not going to happen at the moment, because there's not money behind it. There might be some popular demand for it, but there's gonna be that money behind it, and it's really disappointing that someone could do it, someone could live out their dreams, despite the fact that there's actually no popular desire for it to happen. But anyway, fascinating story. I encourage you to read all the details about it, because it's a crazy, crazy story. When I reached out to Grvik, I had no idea what was going on with them, because they're one of those bands which didn't have a Facebook, only had a SoundCloud and a Bandcamp with very limited information. But as it turns out, it's two guys. They were originally both in Norway, Fredrik and Marius. Fredrik's still in Norway. Marius has been sort of moving around the world and is currently actually in Melbourne, which is why they popped up on my radar, because they turned up in Bandcamp as Australian. Yeah, happy coincidence. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, they kind of play a combination of sort of post-rock and doom metal, but their approach to the music and just the way they actually make it, their process, kind of delivers some interesting results, and you'll hear that throughout the interview. Their album was released back in October. This is Joyful and Omnipotent World. And during the interview, I play two songs, one in the middle, Havbunn, and one at the end, Shinjuku. This is Marius and Fredrik from Grvik. Introduce yourselves and tell us where do you fit in this project?
I'll go first. My name is Marius, and I play guitar and bass.
My name is Fredrik. I guess I do the rest. I lay on the ambient noise, the drums, and the effects.
Now, how do you guys know each other?
That's been a good while.
We've known each other since middle school, junior high, what do you call it?
Yeah, what would be equivalent to junior high, so probably since we were 14, 15, I guess.
Yeah.
We went to the same school and became friends there, and we didn't start playing at first, but we've been friends for a long time before that, actually.
Yeah, we shared the same interest in music.
Yeah.
So how do you guys find yourselves on different sides of the world?
That's my responsibility, I guess. We both grew up in the same place, which is where we took our name from, actually, seeing as none of us live there now. Grvik is a small suburb of outside our hometown where we grew up. And I have been the last maybe 10 years been moving around a bit, so been living in Norway and China and now Australia, so I'm the one creating distance here.
The globe trotter.
Yeah.
So what brings you to our fine southern land?
My wife used to live here, so we just decided to give it a try after living together in those other places I mentioned. So she studied here, and I got to know her here, and then we moved around a bit, and then moved back here again with me this time.
Oh, that's really nice. So Grvik, when did this start? Like, so you guys have been sort of separated, by the sounds of it, for sort of periods of times. Like, did this start when you guys were both living in Norway? Was it started when you guys were in different places? How did it all come about?
Yeah, well, we've played in the band way back when we were like teens. Actually, we just played with one band together, didn't we, Marius?
Yeah, it was one band. It never really panned out, but we had fun rehearsing.
Yeah, we joined the local like competition.
Yeah,
and ended up in like last place, I guess.
Yeah.
And but we've always been in like the same what do you call it, musical collective. We have this old rotten building with rooms that and different bands playing and hanging out.
Yeah, that was how we started playing together, the beginning, and then we I can't remember when that stopped, but there was a long time where we didn't where we weren't in the same bands. Well, we were both still playing.
Yeah.
And this particular one started up while I was here, so that would have been 2015, I think, late 2015 maybe.
We were like just communicating via email. Like, you remember the 90s, what we listened to you. And
yeah, that's right.
It would be fun doing some stuff.
Yeah, so we made some playlists and turned out we had, again, some common interests in genres or what you'll call it, and decided to give it a try because right at the beginning I actually I brought my guitar over here, but I don't have any equipment, and I got one of those original, I think probably the first version of those iRigs from Fredrik time.
Was it a birthday present or something?
Yeah, I think it was, and I started messing around with that one and figure out let's just put something on the iPad and we can send online. Now that didn't last too long before I realized I had to get some other sort of sound equipment, but that was the start of it on this roundabout.
Right.
I know this may be kind of like a stupid question, but like something I always like to ask bands which are instrumental is, like, why did you choose to keep it instrumental? Why didn't you involve other people in the project? Why did you want to keep it just between you two?
Right.
I think initially we just wanted to create some stuff, and was wanted to, for me at least, I guess maybe Fredrik will have a different answer. For me, I just wanted to create some music together, and then it kind of felt natural to keep it with us two, and following with the tracks, kind of. I'm not quite sure what to call it really. I mean, it was me who labeled it post-rock on there, but that's purely because we don't have a vocalist, so that was the easiest genre to put it in. Yeah. And Fredrik did mention once to, try to reach out to someone to put some vocals on, but I think we might have been open for it if we knew someone, but I was a bit hesitant to just send it out to these communities to try and get some. I wanted to have some sort of control of it.
Yeah, right. I suggested that alley thing or something that propeller heads are. Yeah, I use Reason as a software, and they have some integration with like this social network music platform. But in the end, we just thought that, it's better left unsung.
Yeah.
Sort of digging through the limited kind of like information that there is out about you guys. So you've got a SoundCloud, and you're releasing songs starting back in, I think it was 2016. So you released a song sort of progressively over that time up until about a month ago. What was the original intention of the project? Like, what were you trying to do? Were you always working towards releasing an album, or were you just writing songs and just putting them out there?
Well, you want to take this one?
No, sure. Start you. You can start.
Well, I think we started writing and putting stuff together, and the most I didn't. We just thought it was best to put it on SoundCloud as we got them, and we kind of wanted to hold back to put it elsewhere until we got enough to collect it to a record. So it was meant to be put together to a record, but we didn't really have any sort of timeline or grander idea. We have I'm normally writing the first drafts of things, and then we upload it and pick and choose and start creating them. So it's not really it's quite. It depends on what we worked on, what came in there, and we just kept putting them onto SoundCloud all the way until we got enough to put a record together. So I guess you could say it was some sort of end goal, but it wasn't really something that we had to have done there and then. And actually, we just put together the last track of the record to tie it all together when we felt that we had enough.
Yeah. I think it started out just as a hobby and a way to keep in touch and keep the music interest alive.
Yeah.
And then as Marius has output way more than me, so but as time went by and we got more backlog of music, we started to see that maybe we should consider bundling it together as an album. So
you mentioned, I think that Marius does the first draft. Am I mistaken in saying that's like he sort of comes up with the initial ideas and then you sort of work on it together? Is that kind of how it works between you two?
Yeah, Marius starts out usually with a full track in GarageBand, or the bass and guitar, and several passages. So it's really a full song with those two elements when I get them in the Dropbox. And then I usually just listen through and choose the bits I like and try to spin off some ideas, randomness of that.
Yeah, it does. When I do start, I layer all the guitars and I make a full track, but it's always this is what keeps it a bit interesting too, because it ends up differently. When I write them, I normally been in, well, not this kind of bands, but in bands with traditional instruments. So when I write it all, I kind of think in more traditional ways, while when Fredrik gets them, he does different things with what he mentioned with the ambient sounds and the more electronic stuff that he inputs, which I would not think about. So once I put up a full track and he starts working on it, he does one passage at a time maybe, and we go back and forward, and eventually we end up with a finished one.
Yeah, I take a kind of, I guess you could say, a remix approach to the material that he uploads. So usually what comes back to Marius is something else.
Marius, like, how do you approach, like, sort of taking your part in that in isolation? Like, how do you approach it? What do you do to try and come up with parts of a potential song?
If I have some idea to start with, I'll start messing around. Sometimes I will start without any idea and just mess around with different well, I do it on the computer, so I'm hesitant to call it amplifiers, but for the sake of calling it that, mess around with different sort of sounds, amplifiers, and what's available there. And it normally comes quite organically if I find I get some inspiration from whatever sound effects or amplifiers I do, and then once I start writing something, I get some more ideas, and it might be one part, or it might be almost a full track, but I go back and forward with it, and as I said, I like to structure them in some traditional sense, with some that it moves from one thing to another, and normally we keep it like that too, but sometimes Fredrik will like remove parts or move them around, but I start with just getting the idea, writing the melody lines maybe, layering it with riffs or background sounds. There's normally 4 to 5 guitar tracks on every one of them, so I build on them until I feel it sounds the way I kind of imagine it, and once I tie it together with different parts, or if I just want to have some of them just have one part that never comes back again too. Sometimes I do all the writing, then I do the what do you call it, composition afterwards, and how I want to structure them, just to at least have my idea going, and then once I'm satisfied with it, I'll put it up in our common Dropbox, and we store them there for Fredrik to pick one and work on.
And Fredrik,
pick one to destroy.
Fredrik, what is your process to it? Like, how do you approach something when it's been handed over to you?
Yeah, well, I start with GarageBand, obviously. And I just listen through the whole thing, usually, at first. Sometimes there's like a passage or a riff that, oh, that's cool. I want to try something with that. And I usually start adding effects or export tracks I like for further processing in Reason. And usually it's I'm just picking the latest shiniest toys, the plugins, and try to have fun, basically.
And so do you guys go back and forth like that a couple of times, or is it kind of just Marius does his thing, Fredrik does his thing, and then it's over? How does that all work between you two?
Yeah, we go back and forth probably at least 10 times, maybe more. 30 times we have like versions of the song, like and
there's many back and forwards, I think, and also sometimes Fredrik will like do one part and go back and forward until like that segment of the track is done, and then we move on to the next one. So it's not often that he'll finish the whole thing. He'll send what he's done, and so most of it we do agree on, and some of the stuff we will be changing a bit and tweaking a bit, and then is moving on. So it's definitely a lot of back and forward, and hence why also our output isn't very high per year.
No, it's a slow process.
Yeah.
Each song has many branches, so if I was a better programmer, we could probably make something like interactive out of it. So you could travel through different paths. That'd be cool.
That's interesting. Like, how do you guys communicate about like do you call each other over Skype, or do you message each other? Like, how do you communicate and like let each other know, like, oh, I think we should do this, or that's ready. Let's go and do some more work on a different section. How does that work between you two?
I think mainly it's all in emails, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, because our time difference is pretty big here. He starts work when I'm off work, and when he's off work, I'm sleeping. So we normally do it on email or a bit on Skype now and then we do too. But I think we have some email threads that are monstrously big.
Google, when Google starts acting up, we just start a new thread because it's
too heavy.
Crushing Google mail.
So I mean, we also see each other when I go home to visit, but we rarely is actually never doing any music stuff then.
Yeah, we have busy lives.
Yeah.
Tell me about it. So one thing I kind of noticed about, sort of listening to the music and thinking about it sort of chronologically in the way you guys released it on SoundCloud, is that it kind of starts a lot more sort of focused on maybe like the metal and the noise elements, and then kind of leans into kind of, I know, more like ambient, post-rock, like electronic sound. Is that something that's just kind of naturally happened? Was that something that your interests were changing, or is that just me being crazy?
Oh, you're definitely right about that, but
definitely you being crazy.
No, I think that's quite correct, but it's got more to do with I think like the first one. When we started that, it was some of the inspiration was slightly different than what continued on, but also actually I tried to keep a lot of those same elements in the other tracks, but they're more behind the kind of, I don't know what you call it, like the post-rocky guitar thing, like the reverb chorus thing now. So I still try to keep those those kind of waves of distortion there, which is what is much more prominent in the beginning than in the later ones.
Yeah, I think the first track kind of we went a bit overboard with the layers and the noise, and it kind of grew into this.
And the first track has three very distinct parts, which is also the order I put them together in. So, and I was, this hasn't really panned out yet, but maybe later, because in that one I'm also thinking to have this kind of Merzbow type of harsh noise in there, which it's a little bit, but not as much as it could have been.
Now, another thing that I always find interesting about bands which don't have vocals or lyrics is the song titles. Why do you give particular songs particular titles? Like, what's the meaning of those names you give them?
Mm-hmm. You take this one, Marius.
Yeah, there's no deep meanings to it. It's just what when I write them and when Fredrik writes them, we never have a title until they're done. And when they're done, then we come up with suggestions, and it's mainly just something that they associate. Can be associated to the track or to the sound or some sort of internal happening. I think you'll find they all have reasons behind them, but they're not very deep reasons. It's just what we thought would fit the sound and the track when we worked on it.
The first track, which is actually the last track on the album, is just track 1 in Norwegian.
Yeah, that's very original of you. I'm kidding. So one of the tracks, I think it's in Japanese. Why? Obviously, I think the rest of them are in Norwegian. Makes sense. But why is that one in Japanese?
That was and that particular one. I just it was my suggestion there because I kind of felt it just fit to that one scene in Lost in Translation where Bill Murray is driving through Tokyo, which is my favorite movie. So I've seen it countless of times, and also I love Shinjuku myself, so that's the reason. Those two reasons really, and Fredrik said, "Okay, cool, let's use it." Yeah. That was it. And by saying that, though, as I mentioned to Fredrik, I'm not comparing it to the already great music in that movie. I just felt it had a similar vibe.
The album title is interesting. Where did that come from?
It says on the sign.
Yeah, that I'll take that one too. So we were actually when we were preparing the record, we had another cover art prepared for it. Yeah, and we were trying to come up with a title, if any, and all of the images we use are just photos we took ourselves to keep it simple. And this, I kind of forgot. I took this photo when I was in China with my family last year because when I saw the sign, that name and the sign itself felt quite. I just thought it already looked like a pre-made record cover with a title, and I forgot about it for a good while. So until we were preparing this and already done with the other cover art, actually, then I remembered the image and I sent it to Fredrik and I said, "Look what I found last year. I was meant to use it for something and forgot about it." And he liked it too. So we turned around in the last place. So actually, that sign is the only thing that's changed on it. Is the name which Fredrik edited. Yeah. That text and everything was there to begin with.
Yeah, it's just the Grvik logo that was amateurishly photoshopped onto the sign.
So, what is that place? That's
joyous, omnipotent place.
Yeah, I didn't go to that joyful world, unfortunately, but it was on the road when we were driving. We were driving from the name escapes me now. We went to a Buddhist island there with my family, who was Chinese, and we were driving to Hangzhou. So it's right in between there, but I don't know what the place actually is. I only got to see the sign.
Sounds like an amusement park of some sort.
Yeah, the logo that was originally there before Fredrik put the Grvik thing there looked like some sort of amusement park logo.
Yeah.
That must be a hell of an amusement park. Wow.
Should probably try to visit that before we die.
It should be on the bucket list now.
Yeah, maybe we should try to have our first gig there.
So you guys mentioned earlier, like, there sort of has been a bit of a move in the sound of the band from when you put out the first song to the last song a month ago or so. Like, what's been happening with you guys? Like, have you been listening to different music, or so what's been happening for you guys that sort of enabled you to make that sort of slight transition, I guess?
I think, well, I listen to. I'm not sure. My taste in music has changed over the course of the existence of our band, but just like the workflow and how we more or less have settled on how we create the music.
Yeah, I don't think also that the musical taste hasn't really changed, but it just kind of started to skew a bit more in that direction, and that's also because I was messing around with the amplifier things and such, I think, and I realized that all this sounds cool. I can make more of this type of similar, like explosions in the sky kind of sounds and things, and the first stuff was a bit more, I don't know, we wanted to make slow things when we started this,
like stoner-ish.
Yeah, well, focus for a good while, and I guess still is to keep the tempo pretty slow on it. And then now it just has developed a bit more with the melody lines and such, which was more or less nothing on the first few tracks. So, and also, by the way, the tracks that we have on the record now aren't necessarily the first 5 we wrote. I think the first 2 or 3 might be there, and then we've been jumping a bit in order.
Yeah.
So there's some older ones waiting to be done in the Dropbox folder still. But the musical taste stayed the same. It's more what was the direction there and then, I guess. And as Fredrik said, it got more settled in that particular style as we went on. So I think the majority of the tracks are more close to like the first one on this record than the last one, so to say.
Yeah, I think chronologically that the tracks on the album are like the 1st, 2nd, 4th, 7th, and the 11th song you uploaded.
Yeah, probably the first one is the 11th one. Yeah, so it's opposite actually.
Yeah, and right. And so we have a backlog of like 9 songs or something, 8 songs.
And so is that your plan for your future? Kind of keep working on those songs that you've already sort of been developing to a certain extent?
Maybe not. It's been a while since I listened to the other ones. We've been focusing on getting the ones we have ready. But we'll go back and listen through, and I'm sure Marius will keep uploading more stuff. Yeah, I'm sure there's we need to go back and revisit, but I know there's not that long since I rechecked them, and it's definitely enough for one more album in there, and last one I wrote is probably a month ago or so, so we're still doing things.
Cool. Now, you talked a little bit about the things that were sort of initially inspiring you, kind of like doom, noise sort of stuff. What kind of bands were sort of inspiring you at that stage? Like, what sort of bands were inspiring you that you initially wanted to kind of work on this particular type of music?
We probably have different reference points there, I would assume. We might have some similar ones, but um, the stuff that I kind of want, well, inspired when I write a lot of this stuff is in some of the usual suspects, I'd say, like I mentioned, explosions in the sky, and also with the slower stuff that I mentioned. Right around the time we started it, I went to see Sun here in Melbourne, which was something that inspired things to slow down quite a bit. And other, I guess the slow parts I don't really have too much, like the slow riffing and such. I don't have too much reference points that I have in constant rotation. It's more of those post-rock bands, like also like Sigurd Ros I listen a lot to, although would sound nothing like it, but it might be sneaking its way in there still when I'm thinking about writing, and also lately a bit of Mono, the Japanese band. But I think, I don't really know where I'm taking the slow stuff from. Also, some of the stuff that we haven't really released yet has a bit of this kind of My Bloody Valentine parts to it. There's a lot of sharp distortion. That is it's not a good summarizing, but that might be some of the ones I have.
Well, I listen to like stoner rock, like Sleep and Loose, but I also listen to a lot of more like electronic music. Trent Reznor stuff inspires me, I guess, and ambient and noise bands like Boris, E.G. Lost, stuff like that. I'm a great fan of stuff like Boards of Canada also, and Whatever and IDM like that.
Couple last questions about you guys. So Marius with the guitar, when did you pick that up, and why'd you stay with it?
Well, actually, the first time I had where I really just played on a guitar, I didn't find it interesting at all because it was in school, where we just had like once a week some guitar things. So I didn't stick with it then. And at the time I was doing
sports. To play Tom Doodley.
yeah, it was the same thing over and over. Maybe Imagine here or there or something like that. But so I didn't stay with it then. And then I was playing sports, and I was friends with Fredrik, and Fredrik had like I guess it was like a Fender knockoff.
Yeah.
That was always hanging
like
on his wall.
$100 Fender thing.
Yeah, and it was one day where I was at his place, and I'm left-handed, so I could never just pick up a guitar when I was at friend's place and play them because it would be upside down and everything. But he just detuned it and just showed me, hey, if you play here and there, try that. And then all of a sudden it was the first riff of Smells Like Teen Spirit, and then suddenly guitar was a lot cooler. And he had like a really small PV with a really harsh distortion, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And when that kicked that in, and then suddenly that was a lot of fun, and I think we decided there and then that let's start a band. So I do remember to this day actually that Fredrik actually restringed the guitar upside down and drilled a hole in it so that I can use it.
Yeah.
and he started playing drums, and then we started that first band, if you can call it that. At least we had a lot of fun rehearsing with it.
Yeah.
And then from there on, I went on to keep playing in other bands later, in different different styles. I played in punk bands. I started playing bass later too in some punk bands, and kept playing guitar in some hardcore bands. So it's just been sticking along, until now, really.
And Fredrik, what attracted you to the electronic aspects?
Yeah, I guess it started when I bought my first computer. It had some trackers installed, and I bought it used, so I got a disc full of mod files. So I started to listening to those and changing stuff and just playing around with it. Later, I went on to hardware synthesizers and MIDI trackers, and so I always enjoyed having fun on the computer with music, I guess.
And final question for you guys: do you? I know sometimes it can be a difficult one, but do you have any favorite bands or albums?
Quite many, probably.
Yeah. Well, I've always been a fan of instrumental music. I guess a bit weird maybe, but Osric Tentacles has been one of my favorite bands since the early 90s.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I have a particular one, and the ones that I do are my favorites. Really aren't similar to the music we're playing at all. I think one of my maybe favorite records throughout time is Lifted record by Bright Eyes, and then there's a whole heap of other different style and genres that would fit in. I really the last couple of years I've been listening a lot to the Men Singers, which I think keep putting out great records. But it'd be hard. I don't know how to. I don't have a particular favorite. I would say that would be too hard to answer.
That was Shinjuku from Grvik's album This Is a Joyful and Omnipotent World, and before that we heard Havbunn in the middle of the interview. That was Grvik. Really, really good to talk to them. It was actually my first interview which connected two different people in the same Skype call. No idea you can do that, but you can. Wonders of technology. And I really appreciate the guys trying to work out the time zones and get together with me. So I really appreciate that. So thanks so much to them. A recommendation before I finish today's episode. This one's by a band called Anal Trump. It's a comedy grindcore band in the vein of grindcore legends Anal Cunt. It's by Travis Ryan from Cattle Decapitation, and I'm not sure who does the instrumentation, to be honest. It's listed as Rob Trump, but it's probably Rob somebody from some other band. But yeah, it's really cool stuff, both because it just takes that extremity that I think only Anal Cunt could really deliver, the combination of absurd lyrics, incredibly short songs, and you know, that really sort of extreme grindcore approach, which, you know, obviously a lot of other bands share, but I think Anal Cunt brought a special kind of just absurdity to the whole process. They take the offensive lyrics, offensive song titles in a way that I think is the only real way you can kind of get away with it in this modern age and not come off like absolute bastards about it. Just because it's really in the vein of Trump. You know, it's not meant to be I'm some random dickhead who's being an asshole about stuff. It's, you know, this is an expression of the vileness that is Donald Trump. The latest sort of compilations of a bunch of EPs they've put out, the first 100 songs, I think this in particular is a really good one because, like all the other previous releases, the proceeds go to some sort of charity, which is really good, especially in this sort of time when a lot of people are in need, particularly in the United States. So that's the first 100 songs by Anal Trump. Later in this week, I'm going to have an interview with Shallow Grave from New Zealand, so keep an ear out for that. But thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you later in the week.